Hey all, I hope you're doing fine. It's the first day of my screws being out of the jaw. I can talk much better now, so time for a video, and I wanted to do this for a long time. It's gonna be a reaction video. It's gonna be a reaction video on Russell Ackoff's great video, If Russell Ackoff Had Given a TED Talk, which he didn't, which he couldn't because TED Talks weren't available at the time. I have a special relationship to the video, which is that I cited a couple of what he says in those videos in some of my earlier talks a couple of years ago. I think at the time I was a bit angry about some things, just as he is. And I used his weight to give my arguments more weight, I guess. Yeah, so who is Russell Ackoff? Russell Ackoff is a systems thinker, a management thinker. The lady who's going to introduce him is going to do that much better than I do right now. I also have a special relationship to what he's doing because of one book he wrote, which is on idealized design, which gets rid of the idea that you should design for the future, but the thing you design for right now, it should be a better thing now in the system you're living in. So it's getting rid of that temporal view of things, which is good for a couple of reasons. This could be an 2 hours podcast just talking about that in itself. Anyways, he was also good friends with Deming and Peter Drucker. So Peter Drucker, the guy who wrote everything you need to know about management. No management books have to be written after him, basically. He knew it all. He wrote it all. We still don't listen. And you will see in the video, there will be a couple of things which sound super trivial, but we don't act like it. Anyways, no rehearsal. It's just going to be plain reaction to the thing. I'm going to run linearly through the video and comment on it. Okay, here we go.
Our next speaker is a scholar, a philosopher, an activist, a teacher, a gentleman, and one of the leading theorists on systems in the world. I tape many conversations with Dr. Deming and other experts, and the most unusual and perhaps the most enjoyable was a conversation between Dr. Deming and Dr. Ackoff. Dr. Ackoff was one of the only person actually to call Dr. Deming Ed. And Ed really loved it. He was delighted and pleased to learn from Dr. Ackoff, and I would like to think that he's tuned in now as Dr. Ackoff speaks to us on Beyond Continual Improvement.
You see, she's doing it much better than me. She even mentions that these guys are so close that he calls him Ed. Cool. Here is Russ.
Coming as I do at the end of a distinguished line of speakers, I feel like a pornographic movie being shown to people who have just engaged in sex. In short, anti-climax.
And that in itself is already funny. Yeah, that funny. Like, Tim Walz of the old times, maybe. Because like these guys are so dry. Like if you look at old Deming videos, like he's the driest person you can ever meet. Like it's hard to detect the humor even. But they're so to the point. That's the quality. And so that he's making these jokes is kind of odd. Anyways.
I should explain, I really wasn't arrogant when I was calling Dr. Deming Ed. He and I worked together in 1950 at the U.S. Bureau of the Census when nobody called him Dr. Deming. He was Ed. I was not called Dr. Ackoff. I was called, hey, boy.
Humble.
Quality improvement is something that my principal mentor, Winnie the Pooh, once called a good thing. Capital letters. He always had it. Given that it's held so highly, it seems curious that in several national surveys recently conducted, over 2/3 of the managers who had authorized the introduction of quality and improvement programs consider those programs to be failures. Now, the professionals tend to excuse that by saying the criteria for failure is irrelevant. It's not what we would have used. But that's irrelevant, because the definition of quality has to do with meeting or exceeding the expectations of the customer or consumer. And the customer or consumer is the one who authorized the introduction of the program. And therefore, if their expectations are not met, it's a failure, whatever the expert thinks.
I had to think about this for quite some time, but I think the parallel is like, when you talk today about transformations, change programs, which fail a lot, and then we say, yeah, but it's because of the environment, like that's exactly the thing. They fail. And he also goes into the reasons later on, but we do the same thing and we didn't learn that much until then, and we use the same excuses that he mentioned right now.
So it's important, I think, to understand why those failures have occurred, given that quality and improvement are a good thing, so that we can increase the batting average. The hypothesis that I want to set forward to you is the reason for the failures is primarily the fact that they have not been embedded in systems thinking. They have been anti-systemic applications. Now, let me try to explain what that means.
And here we go. Like, it's the same all over again. Like, he's going to talk a lot. I think I remember about how improvement programs are done, for silo by silo, anything. And it's what we're doing today. You try to improve your customer relationship, you improve customer support. But just improving customer support doesn't bring customer satisfaction. It has to be with interaction between customer support and marketing and the product and so on. Like, you have to work on all of this to get a better relationship to the customer. It's not one of those things. And he's going to argue a lot about like how improving just one of those actually decreases customer satisfaction in those cases. Anyways.
First, what's a system? The system is a whole, spelled with a W, that consists of parts, each of which can affect its behavior or its properties. You, for example, are a biological system called an organism, and you consist of parts, your heart, your lungs, your stomach, pancreas, and so on, each of which can affect your behavior or your properties. The second requirement is that each part of the system, when it affects the system, is dependent for its effect on some other part. In other words, the parts are interdependent. No part of a system or collection of parts of a system has an independent effect on it. And therefore,
so if you ever need a system description for the sake of system thinking, take his. Like, they speak a lot. They are really simple and easy to understand, but they illustrate the points of the system very well. What I love about him and Drucker and all these guys, like they come from this direction of systems thinking, but they don't complicate things through systems thinking. They actually make it approachable because they have that clarity about it. Also, they are not the types who overthink stuff and look at yet another direction. They would rather also time box looking at things and then say, it's good enough, now we need to decide and go on, rather than to overanalyze and paralyze over stuff. That's what I like. But like they have this holistic perspective with age, as you would say. But just go ahead also.
The heart affects you depends on what the lungs are doing and the brain is doing. The parts are all interconnected. And therefore, a system is a whole that cannot be divided into independent parts. Now, that has some very, very important implications that are generally overlooked. First,
by the way, think about mergers and acquisitions and carve-outs and stuff like. That's a funny thought if you think about systems.
Essential or defining properties of any system are properties of the whole which none of its parts have. For example, a very elementary system you are familiar with is an automobile. The essential property of an automobile is it can carry you from one place to another. No part of an automobile can do that. The wheel can't, the axle can't, the seat can't, the motor can't. The motor can't even carry itself from one place to another. But the automobile can.
I want to also reflect here the role of the product manager, who bears a lot of responsibility, wrongly, I guess, in most of the times, because what he can do is orchestrate, but he cannot have the responsibility for the system to work because he's not given leverage over the system most of the time. Anyways, he's gonna burn.
You have certain characteristics, the most important of which is life. None of your parts live. You have life. You can write. Your hand can't write. That's easy to demonstrate. Cut it off and put it on the table and watch what it does. Nothing.
Don't.
You can see. Your eye can't see. You can think. Your brain can't think. And therefore, when a system is taken apart, it loses its essential properties. If I bring an automobile into this room and disassemble it, although every single part's in this room, I don't have an automobile. Because the system is not the sum of the behavior of its parts, it's a product of their interactions. And that's been said here in many ways.
And now you know why outsourcing is hard as well. That's the same topic. Reverse.
Now, what does that mean? If we have a system of improvement that's directed at improving the parts taken separately, you can be absolutely sure that the performance of the whole will not be improved.
He doesn't say that if you improve the parts, the departments, you run the risk of not improving. He says he guarantees that. So again, simply working on a team, with a department, just forget about it.
And that can be rigorously proven. But most applications of improvement programs are directed at improving the parts taken separately, not the whole. The proof is complex, and I won't bore you with it. Let's just take a simple example. I read in the New York Times recently that 457 different automobiles are available in the United States. Let's buy one of each and bring them into a large garage.
Okay, classic example again, you might know it, and I talk about simplicity later on. But, if you need a proof or an example, take his.
Let's then hire 200 of the best automotive engineers in the world and ask them to determine which car has the best engine. Suppose they come back and say the Rolls-Royce has the best engine. Make a note of it. Which one has the best transmission, we ask them, and they go run tests and come back and say the Mercedes does. Which one has the best battery? Come back and say the Buick does. And one by one, for every part required for an automobile, they tell us which is the best one available. Now we take that list, give it back to them, and say remove those parts from those cars, put them together into the best possible automobile. Because now we'll have an automobile consisting of all the best parts. What do we get? You don't even get an automobile.
You don't even get an automobile. What I like so much about these guys is the clarity. Also when you listen to Roger Martin, for example, the clarity with which they speak, because they've been there, they've done it, they had skin in the game, they are not just writing about it. It's insane. If you have to come up with examples with that clarity, it takes you half a lifetime. When you have it, when you heard it, it's easy to repeat, but getting to these examples and be able to explain them in that simple and easy language so that even my dogs understand it, that's an insane quality.
This reason that the parts don't fit. The performance of a system depends on how the parts fit, not how they act taken separately. You see, the architect, who's the profession that I think understands systems best, really has the fundamental idea. When a client comes in to see an architect and they say, I want to build a house for my family with 3 bedrooms, a living room, dining room, and kitchen, a family room, a 2-car garage. I want it on 1 floor. I'd like it to be built out of redwood, and I don't want it to cost more than $10,000. What does the architect do?
Dad joke.
He has a set of properties that the client wants. Does he sit down and start to design the kitchen, and then the living room, and then the bedrooms, and then the garage? Is that what he does? Of course not. What he does is produce an overall design of the house. Now he produces designs of the rooms to fit into the design of the house. But he discovers in the process that he can modify the house in such a way as to improve the quality of the rooms. But he will never modify the house to improve the quality of the room unless the quality of the house is simultaneously improved.
And I never understood the point of no sprint zero or whatever. Or, like architecture is only emergent. It's like you pre-think and then you adapt as well. But you have those pre-thoughts about the structure of the house. And then you add to that the ability to adapt later on. But you don't change the structure of the house. So thinking about the structure of the house up front makes a lot of sense to me. And again, that's something I never bought. Like, why not sprint zero?
And that's fundamentally the principle that ought to be used in continuous improvement. The second system principle that is ignored in most of the practices, a practice in a way which derives from the work of Walter Shewhart at Bell Telephone Laboratories in the 1930s. Shewhart developed statistical techniques for determining defects. A defect is something that's wrong. Now, this should be perfectly obvious. When you get rid of something that you don't want, you don't necessarily get what you do want. And so finding deficiencies and getting rid of them is not a way of improving performance of a system. That's easy to demonstrate. Take a television set. Go in and turn it on right now. What's the probability you'll get a program you want? Well, you probably haven't calculated it. I have. 0.01. Boom. Now, it's a defect I can very easily get rid of. All I have to do is turn the channel. What's the probability I'll get a program I want? Still 0.01, which means I have a 50-50 chance of getting a program I want, even less. Basic principle. An improvement program must be directed at what you want, not at what you don't want.
And that is the explanation why a thing like the product death trap exists, where, you are supposed to listen to your customer, to customer support, to your colleagues with all the opinions they have and extract the mistakes they see. It shouldn't be red, it should be this. This doesn't work like I want it. This way you don't even end up with a product. You end up with nothing, no concept at all. How you build a product is by having an idea of the thing in the world, how it exists. And then you improve and improve towards that direction if it's a little bit measly in the beginning. How you don't improve it is by listening to people around you which have an opinion about stuff that sucks. And get rid of that stuff that sucks. That's why listening to all those lists from customer support is not creating a product. Some of those bugs you need to get rid of. I get it. But it's not a way to a good product.
And determining what you want requires your redesigning the system, not for the future, but right now, and asking yourself, what would you do right now if you could do whatever you wanted to? Because if you don't know what you would do if you could do whatever you wanted to, how in the world can you know what you can do under constraints?
And that's idealized design in a sentence, basically, what he describes here. Like, improve the thing for the current world with the current technical possibilities. Don't think about the future, which in workshops helps a lot, because normally the guy who pretends to know the future better wins when time and future is an aspect. And there's 20,000 more aspects to why this is a good idea to leave temporality out. But here you have it from the source in a sentence.
But people don't ask themselves that question. The last point I want to make is that continuous improvement isn't nearly as important as discontinuous improvement. Creativity is a discontinuity. A creative act breaks with the chain that has come before it. It's not continuous. One never becomes a leader by continuously improving. That's imitation of the leader. You never overcome a leader by imitating them and improving slightly. You only become a leader by leapfrogging those who are ahead of you. And that comes about through creativity.
And that is why innovation is hard, basically. It's like you hear it in all the models, but doing it is even harder than what the models describe. And that is because we grow up with that Zen mind of continuous improvement and things get better and better and, by small margins, whatever. But that only leads to a local optimum, not to the global optimum. And you only get that far. If you have bigger problems, you need to invent something really new, something you haven't done before, solve problems you have never seen before. You need to do the research before. And all of that is working in such different space that people aren't used to it. And economically, it's like in the hockey stick that people expect from you through innovation. The hockey stick first goes down, and when it's in the deep dark valley, psychologically it's getting hard, because the halting problem is, when does it get better? Nobody can tell you or your boss or whatever. So you are responsible for the hockey stick not being here. And although everybody rationally knows that the hockey stick will only be here in 2 or 3 years, if it ever comes, it might not even be exponential, but just linear. Someone needs to be responsible for the deep dark valley where things get worse first. And that is the thing about what he talks with creativity and leapfrogging and acts of creativity.
One final point about that. When we look at the models of quality, and we frequently point to the Japanese and what they've done to the automobile, there's no doubt that they have improved the quality of the automobile. But it's the wrong kind of quality. Peter Drucker made a very fundamental distinction between doing things right and doing the right thing. The Japanese are doing things right, but they're doing the wrong thing.
Remember the thing about doing things right and doing the right thing? That's cool. What I don't understand, I never understood with this talk, is why he's ranting about the Japanese, because the Americans did the same, just without the quality. They, everybody wanted to mass produce cars and change the environment due to that and whatever. Anyways. But the point about doing things right and doing the right things, that's crucial.
Doing the thing right is not nearly as good as doing the right thing wrong. You see, the automobile is destroying urban life around the world. Just visit Mexico City, Santiago, or any of those major cities where you find congestion and pollution so bad that children have to be kept home from school. They're not allowed to walk out of doors because the pollution is so intense. And then we talk about the automobiles they're driving. It's a wrong concept of quality. Quality ought to contain the notion of value, not merely efficiency. That's the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. Quality ought to be directed at effectiveness. The difference between efficiency and effectiveness is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And unfortunately, we don't have enough wisdom to go around.
Also, a sentence to remember, that was also one that was always in my talks. What I wanted to say about this is that I was once part of a community that totally prayed the gospel of you need to be efficient first before you can become effective. So processes and quality and what have you before you do the right thing. And that is totally so not my experience. Like the number of experiences I made that you have progress in a company, in environment, because you find the thing that you want to do that makes a lot of sense and is a good product. And you're not yet up to efficient processes, but that this wakes up the department or the company or whatever system you're working in is countless measured in my lifetime. And so I never bought that you first have to be efficient. Like there's many ways to do good stuff. And I didn't hear him say that, so I take his word.
Until managers take into account the systemic nature of their organizations, most of their efforts to improve their performance are doomed to failure. Thank you.
If you don't remember that, you will regret it.
Yeah, and if we don't remember, we will regret it. And I hope I get this point again.
That's the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. Quality ought to be directed at effectiveness. The difference between efficiency and effectiveness is a difference between knowledge and wisdom. And unfortunately, we don't have enough wisdom to go around.
Last words, super cool. So what can we remember? We can remember his idea of systems, which is fairly common, but so well described by him. We can remember that the system should be improved as a whole, not the parts. If you improve only the parts, you will lose quality, don't gain quality. The same is if you just reduce the bad parts of the system, you also don't improve the system, which is kind of funny and counterintuitive. And remember that it's all about effectiveness, not efficiency. And driving something super efficient, which isn't effective, is probably worse than the other way around. So that's a couple of cool thoughts. And guys like he, they just keep me up. And I hope that was something good for you. Have a great time. Subscribe to my newsletter and go to my website, look at stuff. Thanks for being here and see you next time. I hope this was a little bit of fun for you. Thank you.